Welcome back, everybody. This is Eric and Chad here with Iraq Veteran 8888. Today we have another gun gripe episode for you here. All right, always fun to do gun gripes. And today we're going to be talking about, or basically posing the question, is America anti-gun? Are Americans anti-gun, anti-2A? That's the question we're posing. We're going to dive into some stuff and sort of talk about it a little bit. I would like to take a moment to thank our friends at Sonoran Desert Institute. SDI has some great gunsmithing programs. If you're wanting a career in the field of firearms technology, check them out. They've got some great programs. They do accept GI Bill, great people, and we really appreciate them supporting Gun Gripes. So check them out. Might have a career in gunsmithing in your future. All right, so we're going to dive into this a little bit. You guys might recall a video that I did with our friend Stephen Gutowski from the Washington Free Beacon. He's a writer over there at Free Beacon. And he and I posed a very similar question. Chad and I would like to kind of dive in into this issue, he and I here, especially since the political environment has changed a little bit since Stephen and I did our initial video on that. At this point, we're sitting on quite a few new gun owners, right, that are out here right now. There's been a little over 8 million new NICS checks for firearms, and as we've mentioned in other videos, I'll just reiterate it for those of you tuning in that may not know the information or whatever. What counts as a NICS check is a NICS check, right? But a 4473, when you buy a firearm, that document can have a number of guns on it, right? So when we say 8 million NICS checks, that doesn't mean that's how many guns were transferred. All right, there could be 30 guns transferred on a single form, right? And it wouldn't matter, right? So those are NICS checks. And then for those of you that aren't in the know and you don't understand, if you have a carry permit, you don't have to undergo a NICS check. You still fill out a 4473, but you don't have to undergo the background check because the carry permit serves as your background check. So when we factor in private sales, also private sales, once a gun is your property, it's your property. You can do whatever you wish with it. Now, some states have a little bit more draconian laws in terms of transferring guns to private parties. Like I know, you got FOID cards in Illinois and things like that. And some states might have a little bit different rules with that sort of thing. But generally, once a gun is your property, it's your property to do with whatever you wish. So when we factor in those three criteria, it's safe to say, I would say modestly, between 15 and 20 million guns have probably changed hands in the last 6 to 8 months, which is a pretty drastic change in the amount of gun owners that we have out there. Many of those gun owners are folks who previously probably were anti-gun or maybe have been on the fence about gun ownership. So the more moderate or maybe left-leaning or moderate-leaning maybe never saw much need to own a gun, but then they've decided, you know what, I think I might need to get a gun to protect my family. They've seen the political environment that exists in front of us. They've seen all of the situations that have presented themselves, and they've deemed it necessary to protect their family, their community, those around them, and they've chose a firearm for that purpose. So it's clear, and I believe important, to make the distinction of why there is such a surge in gun ownership and to identify who those gun owners could be. If you'd like to check out the article that our friend Stephen Gutowski wrote, we'll put it down in the description box below. You can go and check out his Washington Free Beacon article. It's got a lot of great data. With that being said, what do you think?
Well, all right, so kind of basing this video on like a recent Gallup poll, all right? And when our polls go, I mean, they the polls during the past two presidential elections, we've seen how they've been considerably off, all right, especially in 2016. But polls are what they are. A lot of times people don't really answer truthfully because, especially when it comes to polls about firearms. It's like, well, I don't want, some random person knowing what I've got in my house. Like, do you have a gun? Well, no, I don't. But they really do. And we'll cover that in a minute. But is America anti-gun? Do most Americans want to see more gun control enacted? Well, the question was, in general, do you feel that the laws covering the sale of firearms should be made more strict, less strict, or kept as they are now? 57% said they needed to be made more strict. 34% said they needed to be kept as they are now. 9% said they needed to be less strict. All right, but when you come down and you see this question, Do you think there should be or should not be a law that would ban the possession of handguns specifically, except by the police and other authorized persons? No, there should not be. 74%. And this is just in September 30th to October 15th, 2020. So this is just a few months ago. So no, there should not be. But that's just specifically handguns. So if you're a person who's answering these polls and you're like, okay, well, I don't want laws to be more strict, or I want laws to be more strict, but I want to be able to keep my handgun. I don't want just the cops having handguns. It's sort of like, it's almost like a double-sided coin. Mm-hmm. You know, you normally would have heads and tails, but no, you want both. You want both sides to be heads, you know, in your favor. You want both sides to be in your favor. But sometimes I just don't understand the general public, and when these polls and stuff come out.
I do.
You know.
All right. What's happening here? What's happening here is that the barrier of entry for a gun owner, usually their first purchase is a handgun. Most people that become a new firearms owner, they want a handgun to carry around and protect themselves, mm-hmm. whether it's on their property or at large or in their home. A handgun is easier to conceal and hide, or let's just say if you want to, have a small safe or something, mm-hmm. you don't have to have a humongous safe to put a handgun in. They're easier to hide. They're generally, affordable. Okay, so I think the handgun is sort of the low-hanging fruit of what a new gun owner is going to look to protect themselves. Right? The master of arms of running a shotgun effectively is a very specific training regimen, and a shotgun is not a beginner's gun. Okay, it's just not. Now, while people are buying shotguns, obviously, for defense, and many of them as their first gun, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Of course, it's an awesome thing. A pistol or a handgun is probably a more accessible and accepted form of owning a gun because of its ease of concealment. I think that's where a lot of that comes down to. Mm-hmm. And then, two, when we look at the fact that our oncoming administration fervently wants to destroy the Second Amendment and wants to heavily regulate, quote, assault weapons, unquote, right? They want to regulate assault weapons. What they don't realize, I believe, is that folks that are buying an AR, now there are a lot of people buying something like an AK or an AR as a first-time gun, obviously. Of course they are, right? People buy rifles, and they might forego the shotgun or the pistol immediately. But I think that data point rings true that a lot of these new gun owners that are buying guns, one, while the question posed at the beginning of the Gallup poll is a very oddly worded type of question, right? So if you ask someone, all right, here's a question, right? If you ask somebody, do you think that children should be better protected in your community? Well, that's a loaded question. Well, of course we want to see our children protected. Do you want to see less firearms accidents? Well, that's a loaded question. Of course you want to see less firearms used in an accident or used in a suicide or used in whatever type of terrible situation, right? So that's a loaded question. It's got more that comes along with it than meets the eye, right? But when you get down to, do you think that only cops should have handguns? And 74% of the people say, well, no. That tells you right there that they don't want gun control. They don't want only the government to have guns, right? And that's not a politically biased situation, right? Left, right, none of that matters, right? There are people from all backgrounds mm-hmm. and all financial means, right? Firearms are a universally accepted right that many people exercise on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter if you go in and the only handgun you can afford is a $200 High Point, or if you go in and your first handgun was an H&K Mark 23 or whatever. Well, that'd be one heck of a handgun to have as your first handgun. But no matter what financial means you have, there are many people from many different backgrounds, many different means, many different political ideologies that exercise their Second Amendment rights. So the question becomes a little bit more clouded there, right? There's a little more in play than meets the eye than just a simple question. There are certainly many, many more aspects that go into it.
Well, and something too to consider, all right, the current poll 74% people said no, there should not be laws that ban the possession of handguns except by law enforcement or authorized persons. But this number has remained roughly around the 70% mark for years. I mean, even going all the way back. We're at 2004, we're at 63%. 2009, we're at 71%.
It's slowly increased.
2016, we're at 76%. So the way these polls are conducted, it's either phone surveys or face to face. Okay, depending on if they can get a survey of like 80% of the population. Okay, roughly. And this is just generalized. They're not going to survey 300 million people, okay? They're going to survey a small percentage of folks all across the country from various backgrounds, various, financial statuses, various political statuses. They're going to, sample registered Democrats. They're going to sample registered Republicans. They're going to sample registered independents, okay? This is not a one-sided issue. But it's just always curious to me to see some of these numbers in these polls and how many people actually say that they are for more strict laws, although they do admit to owning a firearm.
It is odd if you compare the data point, though, because it is on a downward slope. I mean, when you look at all the way back in 92, when near the crime bill, 78% wanted more strict gun control. So it has been on the downtick, and I think you're going to continue to see that number favor the downward slope as more people become gun owners. That's the idea.
We hope. So, moving on into 2021, it'll be curious to see if these two data points do start to kind of coincide, because we see that back around 2011, 44% wanted more strict gun control, 42% wanted it kept as it is now, and 12% wanted less.
I think also it's worth mentioning that Americans in general, and just we as a populace, have not been subject to an extremely negative lifestyle that is without, that leading a life without, right?
Yeah.
Americans, and not, I think just human beings in general, but Americans especially, it's like they always want some form of conflict, right? If no conflict exists, they create one. And I think that people tend to think in their minds, oh, well, I disagree with something, therefore you should. Or I view it from this perspective, and it's not good enough that you accept my perspective. You must participate, right? So it's not enough that you acknowledge my perspective and allow me to have my perspective. You must participate, or you're canceled, or you're this or that, or we call you this name, or we professionally chastise you, or whatever this case may be. We are so quick to cancel each other because we don't agree with each other. And I think the real issue here is when we look at people, let's just say, that don't own a gun, all right? Let's say that there's probably a lot of people in this country that don't think that they should own a gun, right? They voluntarily choose not to exercise their rights because maybe they don't have the required training, they don't feel confident with a gun, or maybe just there's some political or personal reason where they don't feel like they need to have a gun. And that's okay, right? It is completely okay. You're not required to own a gun, okay? So that's an important distinction to make, is that, people may go, oh, well, I don't think I'm competent enough to own a gun. And it's okay to say, you know what, I don't think I should have a gun. But the issue is, it can't stop there. That's not good enough for them. They have to go, oh, well, not only do I not think I need to own a gun, you shouldn't own a gun either. And in fact, not only should you not own a gun, I'm going to push my representatives to pass laws that make it more regulatorily difficult for you to obtain a firearm. Right?
There's that phrase again.
Right, but that's the thing. It's like, it can't just end at choosing not to accept something and not to exercise a right. They have to infringe on your rights. So that's the difficulty too. There are people that have a fundamental difficulty in the fact that I own guns, or that you own guns, or that anybody other person owns guns. And while and the fact that I own guns doesn't affect their life, I'm not a threat to anyone. I'm not a threat to them. I'm not a threat to their livelihood. I'm not a threat to anything, right? In that environment. That's not good enough.
Yeah.
They have to actively seek out ways to infringe on the rights of others because Americans desire conflict. Exactly. Especially when conflict doesn't exist. We live in an environment where you can get online and order. I can go to Grubhub and I can order food and have it delivered to my front door. I can have the whole world delivered to my front door. I've got electricity, I've got running water, I've got internet, I got the whole world at this screen right in front of me. I've got a supercomputer in my pocket. Okay, I have a land of plenty, waving fields of grain, right? Like they say. This country has it so good that people manufacture perceived conflict where it doesn't exist.
And they manufacture perceived worry about something that doesn't really exist.
Yes.
I mean, we could talk about like the extreme side of like prepping. You know, it might be going a little bit too far down the rabbit hole. Like, I'm for a comfortable level of emergency preparedness. Not quite there. All right. Something that you mentioned. All right, about
But you understand what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I understand perfectly. All right, so like, you know, the world at your fingertips, all right, being able to order everything you need. All right, so I read an article the other day about young people in Brazil who are so afraid of coronavirus. These are young, healthy people that have a very tiny, minuscule chance of perishing from this virus. All right? 99.99999% survival rate for this age group, okay? And no other health conditions, no underlying conditions whatsoever, but they are so deathly afraid of it from perhaps the media's portrayal of everything, whatever the case might be, that they have been sheltering in their homes for months. They have not left their homes, but they have been able to procure all the necessities of their life in that home through their computers, through the internet, through delivery. And I was reading about like the delivery service, like the courier service, all right, for things like Grubhub and the little like, you know, food delivery or grocery delivery, you know, the services, okay, that they're offering now. They have had an exponential increase in demand. So they've had to hire all these new people. So there's like all these people that are out of work, but they've been able to find work delivering goods and services for other people that are wanting to shelter in place.
Well, it's like a lot of those Uber drivers that I've ran into. You know, they do the food delivery stuff on the side. So like when the rides slow down with whatever, you know, their ride service, then they got their food delivery.
It's just a curiosity. I'm like, you know, just there are people out there that are so deathly afraid of what's out there in the world that they will shelter in place and they will become a total recluse. You know, just because of that tiny little bit of fear, which is disturbing. All right, but anyways.
And I think the point too, just to bring it full circle with what I said earlier and to piggyback on what you said, this distinct thing to remember is that people manufacture worry where it doesn't exist. And I think it's clear that, you know, people actively try to interject their feelings on other people. And I think that that's a big part of the gun debate, you know, in this country. Is some people don't see the benefit of owning a gun. Others, obviously, like ourselves, are quite vested in the idea of gun ownership. But there's also something I'll add.
Good.
There is a philosophical difference in the way these people think as well, right? So someone that doesn't want to own a gun, that's perfectly fine. I'm not gonna judge you if you don't want to own a gun. That's fine. Just don't tell me I can't own a gun. The issue is, it doesn't stop there though. Okay. Now, without going too far down this rabbit hole, the issue is that mentality, that type of person, is also a person who probably doesn't have a week of food in their house, a week's worth of food. Probably doesn't know how to plant a garden. Probably doesn't know how to kill and skin their own game, catch their own fish, can their own food. So it is a philosophical difference in dependency on a system. So that's clear to make mention of, right? So you're talking about some people who can't even understand the concept of where food comes from, of having food, how to purify water, how to make their own fire. I mean, they are completely out of touch with the things that we take for granted. So of course guns are not going to be important to them, because they don't even, from a philosophical and just a standpoint of survival, don't possess the instinct of our ancestors.
Just remember, okay, to reiterate things that Eric, you know, and I just said, just over a century ago, and up until up until World War One or World War II, there were a lot of people in rural areas in the United States still, living on homesteads. Okay, they had farm animals, they had gardens. That was the way to survive. There wasn't a big supermarket where you could go and buy everything to your heart's content. There weren't devices that you could order everything that you needed. So just that little bit of time ago, we've come full circle, and now like everything can be handed to you from a delivery person at your door, and you don't have to do anything. I mean, it's insanity, and I really feel like there's some sort of renaissance coming. We're going to come over the hump, and people are going to start going back to that lifestyle. They really already have since the early part of 2019 with all the coronavirus scare and everything. We've talked about that in other videos, our self-reliant series and stuff. But anyways, all right, moving on. All right, this is another interesting thing here. All right, so let's see. This is sort of coming into that fear factor, okay? How worried are you that you or someone in your family will become a victim of a mass shooting? Very worried, somewhat worried, not too worried, or not worried at all. All right, very worried, 19%. Somewhat worried, 29%. Not too worried, 27%. Not worried at all, 25%. The curious thing is, from 2015 all the way to 2019, not worried at all hasn't really changed. 27%, 26%, 25%. And you see this very worried increase from 2017 to 2019. So,
and it looks like it was taken mostly from the not too worried. Mm-hmm. So like the not too worried went down to 27, but then very worried went up.
So they added over. So is it fear that's being portrayed by the media? Okay, mass shootings and things like that, which are a very, very minuscule, tiny percent of crime that actually happens. And as far as like your chances of dying in a mass shooting, you've got a better chance of dying in an airplane crashing, okay, than you do being a victim of a mass shooting. Just to give you some perspective on how rare that incident is. And then now, are you for or against a law which would make it illegal to manufacture, sell, or possess semi-automatic guns known as assault rifles? All right, this is from 2019 again. For, 47%. Against, 51%. No opinion, 1%. Okay, so considering this statistic, a majority, 51%, say that they are against any laws that would restrict the ownership and use of semi-automatic firearms. Very curious, right?
It's really weird to look at that 2016 metric.
I know.
Only 36% was for and 61% against in 2016. So it'll be really curious to see where this data point goes
with new gun owners
with
and things
the
like
new
that.
gun owners.
And, if they're polled and such, and polls are what they are. I mean, polls are supposed to be kind of a general consensus of how a general public feels about a given issue. Okay, the polls are sampled. It's never 100% accurate. There's always a margin of error.
Sure.
But it's just curious to see how people feel about, handgun ownership, how they feel about gun laws as a whole, how they feel about, semi-automatic rifles, okay? It's interesting.
It is different. So, I mean, so we're going to put the link to Stephen Gutowski's article down there. Check it out if you want. Guys, I think the most important takeaway from this video that I want you to sort of get in your minds here is that firearms ownership is a universal right that no matter what political environment you exist within or what side of the aisle you're on, it is a universal right that appeals to everyone. It has, importance in everyone's lives. It is a very, very distinctive and important fundamental human right. The right to self-preservation, the right to stand up to tyranny. And that's the issue at hand here. The Second Amendment shall not be infringed, right? It is the most clear and concise constitutional language in the entire document that says not to be infringed against. But yet, here we are. The courts have failed us. The Supreme Court does not hear nearly enough 2A cases, and it's a very strange political environment. And I know it's changed considerably, even just over the last 3 or 4 months. So we wanted to make this video. If you're watching and you're on the fence about gun ownership, own a gun. It's very important.
I got one more thing.
Go ahead.
All right, remember what we just said. 51% of people polled were against any law that would make it illegal to manufacture, sell, or possess semi-automatic guns, right? All right, so come down here. Do you think there should be or should not be a ban on the manufacture, possession, and sale of semi-automatic guns known as assault rifles? Should be. The same time period. 61%.
Well, but there is to be, and we're going to let you guys go in a second.
But you like Eric said, you could chase it all day long,
but to be clear, there is political bias in this question.
There is.
Because there's no such thing as an assault rifle. That's not a real term that applies to the rifles in question. Now, if the question was, do you think there should or should not be a ban on the manufacture, possession, and sale of semi-automatic guns? Well, your average, all right, so say that you have this 50 percentile group of people is not even a gun owner anyway. They don't even understand the vernacular. They don't even understand what that means.
Assault rifles, the media told them it was scary.
Right. So see, there's political bias interjected into the poll there. So I would seriously doubt the reality of what people understand as being legitimate and what isn't. I mean, so that's part of it, right? Is that you've got people who don't even understand what it is they think they're actually against. It's just what they've been told they're against, or what the media has brainwashed them into believing, right? So it's definitely a campaign of disinformation, a slander campaign aimed at honest people who just want to protect their families. So I would encourage everyone to be a gun owner. I think it's a very important thing, you know. We have to show that we're going to take the higher path and that we're going to be bigger men, right? So and women, of course, we're going to be bigger than what the media makes us out to be, and I mean in a way of being the responsibility and being ambassadors to the responsibility of what gun ownership is, right? Showing that gun owners are average people, good people. We come from all walks of life, all race, religion, different backgrounds, different political backgrounds, different backgrounds in terms of, you know, rich, poor, everyone. The Second Amendment is everyone's right. And I think it's important that we solidify that right as a universal right that we can all we can all agree, hey, this is off the table. Stay away from this. We should all agree that the First and Second Amendment, at a minimum, are off limits. For regulation, off limits. Absolutely. So, guys, thank you so much for watching today's Gun Gripe. We hope you enjoyed it. We have many more on the way. Okay? We hope that you guys will have a great week, and we'll see you next time. Many more videos. I would like to take a moment to thank all of our Patreon supporters for the support. Thank you so very much. As well as those of you who purchase merchandise over on Ballistic Ink. Cha-ching. All of our different t-shirts and hoodies and ball caps and beanies and all our nice little paraphernalia we have for sale. And also we've got our subscription box, man cans. We've made some drastic changes to it. We're putting some great items in our cans. Make sure you check them out. If you love Gun Gripes, if you love the channel, you wish to support us directly, those are the ways you can do so. So thank you so much. Many more videos on the way. We've been really busy with filming, and we hope you'll stick with us. We'll see you next time.
Take care, guys.